What's going on? Welcome back to the MoAir Podcast. Today's guest is Marcus. He's an air traffic controller from Houston, Texas, and he's been in the business since 2019. Okay, Marcus, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
Well, hello, my name's Marcus, also known as PropHatCat online, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. And I just need to preface this saying I don't speak for the FAA or for NATCA, and all these opinions on here are my own.
Perfect. Well, yeah, if you guys haven't followed PropHatCat yet, go and do so. PropHatCat is an awesome channel. He's very knowledgeable about a lot of air traffic control stuff. And if you're scared of ATC, watch it, and I promise you won't be scared of ATC anymore because, that's a thing.
And that's really kind of what I started out with the whole channel. That's kind of what got me inspired. But I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get there, yeah. No, but that's awesome because I was going to tell you, I used to be terrified of air traffic control back when I first started pilot training, and I'm here in the Kansas City area, right? So I stayed away from the Class Bravo as much as possible. So what you're doing is, I'm sure, helping a lot of people out. So what is PropHatCat? Let's start with that real quick.
So PropHatCat, little PropHatCat, really started out with this desire to, I think, want to demystify air traffic control. About 3 years ago, I volunteered with our union to go to Oshkosh, and they have like pilot presentations and stuff there. And I just kind of fell in love with the pilot outreach, kind of explaining like what we do, because I'm just kind of like that nerd that likes explaining, air traffic control kind of stuff to people who either want to know or, are just kind of a captive audience at one of those presentations for the Wings credit. And so that's kind of what started it. And then, those tents are relatively small. You get maybe 200, 300 people in there, and that's good. But then I'm like, there's not really a platform for controllers to like just talk to pilots. After COVID, they kind of shut down this thing called FAM flighting or flight deck training, which was basically it allowed controllers to jump seat on airplanes to kind of understand what's going on in the flight deck, go from point A to point B and have this discussion. And that just kind of went away. And I don't know when it's going to come back, which is kind of sad. Yeah. But so that creates this void of information relay, especially for new controllers. And there's been such a hiring push for controllers recently. And a lot of controllers don't have flying experience. And so having the ability to create these videos and to open this discussion in the comments or, respond to comments with videos talking about what air traffic control sees. And hopefully pilots will then see that and be like, well, actually, this is what I'm experiencing. Say something in the comment, and then you can have this open discussion to hopefully make the NASA a more understanding place, National Airspace System a more understanding place, or at least showcase both sides of the radio to be like, oh, you're actually doing stuff whenever we say to send via. You can't just immediately do another thing, right? Like you're having to verify altitudes and all this stuff. Whereas us, we're just talking. You're the one that actually has to do it. So kind of demystifying both sides of the radio, and selfishly, I'm not a pilot. I don't necessarily know everything that goes on in the flight deck, and so learning and understanding how I can provide a better service to the pilots and the flying public is kind of selfishly why I started PropHatCat, but also just kind of that love for pilot outreach and the wanting to spread awareness and this kind of void of material. There's not a lot of controllers that have social media that they post about air traffic control, partly because it's such a stringent process. There's a lot of stuff that you have to follow in order to do that. But also, like, you're just working airplanes at work. You don't want to come home and talk more about airplanes. You want to do something completely different. But of course, like I said, I'm kind of a nerd and I have no life outside of work. And so that's kind of what evolved into this. And I really enjoyed it. And I really, really just started posting about this time last year, like really, really, really posting. And so seeing the growth that has occurred over the past year has been, unbelievable.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's really, really cool to see that, I guess.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that you were that new in the online world because everything that I've seen has gotten a lot of attention. You got a lot of feedback, which is really cool. But I think part of that is because even though aviation is a niche thing, you have like almost a monopoly on the ATC side of the niche thing.
Well, and that's one of the cool parts, right? There's this content void of this material, partly because it's kind of difficult to explain to people who don't understand aviation, you know?
Right, yeah.
And whenever you're making this content, you can be very niche and be like, hey, this is what a descend via means, but you're going to get 20, 30, 40 views of people who actually know what that means.
Right.
So creating air traffic control content for those people, but also for people who may not understand it or may just be like av geeks or may, you know, they're private pilots now, but they want to flow to the airlines, like providing them the context behind the process, I think has been really, really beneficial. And there's really not that many people who are doing that, especially not in the center. I know a few tower controllers, a few Tracon people, but really nobody in the center that's doing kind of what I'm doing, which I think is because it's a lot of work and nobody wants to go home and do this whenever they get off work, you know.
It is definitely a lot of work. And one thing that I will say that kind of touches on you saying like they might be private pilots waiting to get into the pipeline or whatever, but one of your videos was actually a 2-part video, was if ATC says this is what they mean. That cracked me up because there was a few times where they would say something and I'm like, okay, I think I know what they mean. However, I'm just going to kind of do whatever I think they mean, right?
Yeah.
So that was cool.
And those are kind of humorous, but also, like what you're saying, those are true things that pilots experience. And so, and it's very rare that you have a moment on the frequency to be like, hey, what do you mean by that? You know,
Right.
like I kind of understand it, but like best rate, that's kind of poor phraseology for us. You know, if I need to get you above somebody or below somebody, I need to give you a time to climb. That's actual phraseology. But, you know, some controllers like to streamline things. So they say best rate, and then pilots are like, okay, well, I guess I'll do like 600 feet a minute, you know, or, you know, 1,000 feet or, you know, just nosedive. But what do you mean, you know, and kind of demystifying that stuff, giving the background for the instructions, giving like the human side of the air traffic picture, I think is beneficial because at the end of the day, we're humans, pilots are humans for the time being, you know, a lot of stuff about AI and all that stuff. But, you know, in my career, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that, just with the speed of government. But, but yeah, it's, you know, all we can do is talk, right? All air traffic control can do is talk. And so we want to talk the most efficient that we can. That's why we have phraseology. That's why we have this book of words that we can say. But if there's not anything in the book that pertains to this current situation, because there's hundreds of thousands of different situations that may not be 100% what the phraseology is for, then the phraseology actually gives us leniency and leeway to be like, use plain language to explain what you need. And I think that's a pretty important thing for pilots to understand, is if we're saying something that you don't get, just be like, hey, can you say this in normal words? Can you say this in plain language? What do you want me to do?
Yes.
And then we can do that, you know?
That's awesome, yeah.
Which I think is good.
I think one thing you're going to run into there is ego.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's not a time to have ego. You learn about this all through pilot training. However, some people don't want to sound stupid.
Yeah.
Right? And it is what it is. So if the ATC says something and they don't quite understand it, I would say a good majority of people are not going to be like, hey, what did you mean by that? I'm just flying myself and maybe a couple other people. But still, I could incur something that's going to create an emergency for a lot of people. So it would be better for me to ask, hey, what do you mean by that?
And that's a really big thing that I hope it gets conveyed in a lot of my videos is if you're unsure of the clearance, ask for clarification. There's nothing wrong with that because we would rather you ask for clarification and be safe than not ask for clarification and potentially do something that we didn't intend, right? We don't like surprises in air traffic control. And I know you don't like surprises when you're flying. No. Nobody likes surprises, right? And so how can you cut down on that? Well, you can just verify what both sides of the microphone want to hopefully cut out all the surprises, right?
Right, yeah. That's
And
good.
that goes for private pilots all the way up to commercial, military, corporate, anybody who flies, right?
Yeah. So another random question before I get to your backstory. Let's say they file a flight plan, right? And it says student pilot in their remarks. Does that actually mean anything to ATC?
Yeah, for sure. In the Tracon and in the tower, which is primarily where student pilots are flying generally, they'll kind of know you're a student pilot on your initial check-on, probably, just depending on how confident you are. You know, it's learning a whole new language, and so you have to learn. It's a process. You know, it's like Babbel learning French, Babbel learning Spanish. You're
Right, yeah.
learning aviation talk. And you're going to sound funny sometimes, and we can kind of clue in on it. We've been doing this for a while, right? That's part of the job. We listen to pilots all day, so we know. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that, right? But putting student pilot on the flight strip in the remarks is definitely another way to share that information to air traffic control and make us a little bit less surprised, right? And you say student pilot. I mean, even if you just say student pilot, you know, number 123 student pilot at Atlantic looking for blah, 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 right? Before departure to the east. That clues us in, okay, let's be a little bit slower. Especially if you're like an IFR student pilot, let's get the craft acronym out of the way, kind of slow, because we know if we give it too fast, you're just going to butcher it, you know? And so let's work together to make sure that this information is conveyed both to the pilot and then read back correctly.
Yeah.
And I mean, even you can use student pilot at any time. We're not verifying if you're a student pilot or not. You know, like we don't care. You know, the American or whatever. You know, what was that? Sorry, student pilot. You know, it's kind of funny, but if you're IFR training, you're still a student. You know, you may have certifications, but if you need us to slow down for a PTAC or if you need us to slow down for a route amendment or whatever, we'll happily do that. You know, and alternatively, if you don't want to say student pilot, you can just be like, hey, can you say that slower? That works too. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, the plain language thing.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good to know because, you know, I don't fly as much as I should now. So whenever I go and I hear ATC just blah, 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 sometimes I'm just like, oh, all right then. Well,
Yeah.
this is going to be an interesting flight. But I also come from the law enforcement world where slow is smooth, smooth is fast kind of thing.
It's the same thing in air traffic. Yeah.
We're not wasting extra time by repeating things. So I always ask if I have any trouble. I'm like, hey, can you slow down a little bit? And I've never had anybody get mad about it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Marcus. So let's start out with aviation for you as a child or a young teen, or when was your first, like, I want to be in aviation moment?
So I've always been fascinated with airplanes. I think a lot of little kids are. I think you grow up, you're like, oh, construction, then you go to like the trash truck, and then you're like, oh, airplanes. Let's get fascinated with that. And I grew up in Waco, and we'd go out to the Waco Regional Airport, and we'd see the Colgan Air, you know, Dash 8s or whatever they fly in, and that was really cool. I had one of my birthday parties there, which was really fun.
It's
But,
awesome, yeah.
you know, growing up, you're like, okay, aviation maybe, do some other things. I was really big into theater as well. And then about 2005, 2006, whenever Flight Simulator 10 came out, FSX, I got that and was just kind of smitten with the aviation, you know, simulator bug for sure.
Yeah.
And so I did that a lot at home. That was kind of my big hobby. Then as I got older, I kind of wanted to try the theater thing. So did a lot of theater in high school, and then went to college for musical theater, actually getting a BFA in musical theater.
It's cool.
Then I realized the starving artist life wasn't for me. And so I changed my mind to air traffic control. But before that, so, you know, kind of high school, I got interested in a thing called VATSIM, the Virtual Air Traffic Controller Simulation Network, which basically allows people on their flight simulator to fly with people on their computers providing air traffic control to them. So I kind of got interested in the air traffic control side of that. And that was just really, really fun. I really, really enjoyed that. So whenever I left the musical theater school, I was like, what if I actually tried to do this air traffic stuff, you know? And so I wanted to go to school in Texas. There's only 2 schools in Texas that had a CTI program, a Collegiate Training Initiative program, TSTC in Waco, and then LeTourneau University in Longview. And I was planning on going back to Waco, grew up there, but then my aunt was like, hey, I hope you pay for LeTourneau if you want to go there. Okay, twist my arm, right? So go there. They had a 4-year degree as opposed to the 2-year degree at TSTC, and it was great. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. They basically just had like a tower and a TRACON simulator, that approach control simulator. So I applied to the FAA for the 4 years that I was there, and then a year after as well. And I finally got in on my 5th time, going to center. So nothing that I'd practiced in tower or TRACON. But it's still beneficial because you learn the rules and the regulations. And basically the CTI program was like Academy Basics, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it wasn't wasted time whatsoever. And the degree is really nice. I have my dispatch certificate as well. I have my AGI. So I kind of have almost all of the certifications you can get without actually flying an airplane, which is kind of
awesome.
Funny. Yeah. But then went to Oklahoma City, which is where all federal controllers are trained if they're off the street, or CTI at the moment. And then got to go to Houston, which was really, really cool. Then started there, 2019. 2020 happens. They sent us home for a year and a half because we were still training and we were, non-essential, which really hurts after they say it over and over and over again. Like, I just want to be essential, But anyway, that ends, go back, get certified, and then control airplanes, which is pretty fun. Awesome. I've forgotten the question. That's kind of how I got here. Was that
that's
the question?
Good. Yeah. The question was, how did you get into aviation?
There you go.
So
yeah.
That was good. Yeah. So I like it. You started out training in college. You got all these certificates, right? And then you go and you start actually doing the center job. You said nothing that you trained on, but you got the basics. When you first started your job, were you like, holy crap, what did I do? Or was it like, hey, I got this, I understand it, and I'm going to have a good time?
So that's one of the cool parts about VATSIM. VATSIM models the real world pretty well for being a simulation. All of the SOPs, LOAs, or majority of them are FOIA'd, so that Freedom of Information Act. So you're seeing the stuff that you are using in the real world, minus like the redacted stuff, which you really don't care about on virtual stuff. And so going into it, like I could understand that stuff, which some people off the street or even some of my CTI friends weren't exposed to yet, and so I feel like that kind of gave me a leg up, which was really nice. And then once you get to the actual control facility, I'd been talking to virtual pilots since 2008. And so getting to actually talk to real pilots, you just kind of slide right in and it just kind of works, which is really kind of surreal on one hand, but also like, oh, I already know how to do this, right? More or less, I'm just learning how to do it in the real world, which is a lot more stressful than VATSIM for sure, at least a lot more airplanes. But yeah, it's really, really cool to just kind of achieve that goal, because I've wanted to be a controller since the 8th grade. And so to achieve it and to be like, wow, I am doing that now. And if I don't want to do anything else, I don't have to, like this is the job until I retire, which is wild.
That is really cool. So you touched on it being stressful. And I've always been told all through like my aviation training and getting out and doing it in the real world, all that stuff, that ATC is one of the most stressful jobs that you can get, right? And me coming from law enforcement, I'm like, that's pretty stressful too.
Yeah, so, for sure. And you have people that are shooting at you.
Yeah, you get used to that. You kind of get used to that, which sounds crazy, but you do. So what is the one of the most stressful parts of your job? Is it just time management? Is it different people's like attitudes? Is it a combination of all of that? What's the stressful part?
Day to day, it's really not that stressful. And a lot of my coworkers will be like, well, don't tell them that. That's going to ruin it, for everybody. But it's true. It's the same call signs every day. Airlines have these schedules and they're flying from point A to point B most of the time. It's like what I said earlier, the surprises, the emergencies. Whenever we have weather, we have a big line of weather blowing through Texas right now. And my last session today was very, very controlled chaos, I guess. There was just a lot of airplanes flying through because everybody on this side of the line wants to go through my airspace and everybody on this side of the line wants to go through my airspace. And there's a lot of airplanes. And that's, I think, the most stressful part of the job is the weather deviations, weather days, emergencies, because most of the time the job is really, really chill. It's really, really cool. But it's those moments of, it's, normal, oh my God, and then normal, oh my God, and then normal, right?
Yes.
It helps you remember that you have a heartbeat, as you're doing this. And actually that's kind of why I was a little bit late for this recording. It was one of those days where you drive home and then you don't really realize how you got home because your brain was just thinking about so many other things going on. Got home and I was just I just need to take a nap or something because I just need to reset. Yes. So thank you for working with me on that.
That's all right, man. No, I understand decompression time.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that every once in a while.
And I think that's another big thing with the stress of this job, right? So a lot of people don't take anything from work home. That's one of the benefits of this job, right? You unplug and you don't have to bring paperwork home. You don't have to do a spreadsheet that's due on the desk by your supervisor on Monday, blah, blah, blah. This, you go, you plug in, you work your airplanes that are on your scope in real time, you unplug. You don't have to think about it ever again, right? Because that's the job. There's always going to be more airplanes. If you start thinking about it, you spiral, right? That's, I think, one of the stressful things too, if you're not good at compartmentalizing work stuff and home stuff and whatever, which, as I say earlier, I'm kind of a nerd and I like doing this stuff at home. But whenever I have days like this, I'm maybe we're not making a video today. Or, something happens and I remember it. I'm okay, how can I use that as content for a video, right?
Yeah, that's good.
A big thing that I noticed today, which I'm really proud of all of my airplanes that flew through today, pretty much not anybody asked for a shortcut, which is amazing because most of the time, they check on and they're on this route all the way around Texas. They've already flown over New Orleans, they've flown over Lake Charles, now they're going over Houston, then San Antonio, then to Austin, then to Abilene, then to the northwest corner post of DFW. It's a long flight. I get it. That's how everybody's going, though. And if you are shortcut on the conga line, then you cut somebody off further down the line. And that's not very nice, right? And so I'm very proud of a majority, I think pretty much everybody didn't ask for a shortcut, especially in my sector, which is the sector that everybody was going around the weather in. So that was really nice. So
that is nice, yeah.
I think if I were to make a video about today, that would probably be one of the big ones. And they're just flying, they're just flying around, and if they need something, they'll tell you, but otherwise they're just happy, just level at their altitude, which is great because then that allows you to focus on other things, right?
Right.
As opposed to being hey, how are the rides up ahead? How's this? How are the rides at 36? I'm I don't know. I have so many other things to do right now than get you a ride report 1,000 feet above you. It's, if you're not in moderate or severe or extreme turbulence right now, just wait until the next sector, please. Right. And there weren't that many people who did that today, which is really nice. So
that is good. Yeah. So you talked about it, that you do en route, right, above 11,000. So most of the people that you deal with are either going to be some sort of commercial flight, whether it be a jet or cargo transport or whatever. How often do you get just private pilot en route through your area?
Pretty often. Pilatus's, TBMs, your higher performing turboprop aircraft, piston aircraft, that are supercharged. We get a Malibu every now and then. And a lot of Learjets, a lot of small corporate guys as well. Anybody who flies through who's in the system talks to us, right? Which is pretty cool. We'll get, a Cheyenne every now and then, or, a Skylane at 11.5 or 12, just underneath the oxygen thing requirement, right?
Right, yeah.
And those guys are fine because most of the time they're out of the way of everybody because they're so low. It's really somebody was getting mad at me actually on Instagram, I think, because I keep dogging on Pilatus's And it's nothing against the Pilatus itself. It's nothing against the pilot. But the Pilatus loves to fly at like 25, 27, just right in the middle of our departure corridor and like the arrival corridor. So everybody departing is stopping at 24, for the Pilatus going at 25. And you're like, and they're fast. They're good performing aircraft, but they're slow when you compare them to a 737 or when you compare them to a 767, right? So there's nothing against the Pilatus, but they're just always in the way, which is fine. That's why they pay me, right? To make sure that those airplanes are safe. But it's just like, you see it, it's a Pilatus, you're like, okay, here we go. 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet below, especially if they're opposite direction, all your departures. And then you get like the King Air or the TBM that's filed for 31, which is a good altitude. It's fine, but it's also like, I'm giving a traffic call to a 737, at 29 or 30 for a King Air 1,000 feet above them. They're like, what? How's a King Air up here? That's strange. Which is pretty fun. But yeah, it's the blend that also keeps the job really interesting. If we just had one type of aircraft, the job would be easy, right? Which,
right, yeah.
That's part of why I like the job. Every day is a challenge. Every day is different. You're not sitting in a cubicle trying to, do spreadsheets. You get to think creatively, which is really fun, but within a confined set of parameters. But that you need to know the confined set of parameters so that you know how to apply different rules and different concepts, which is pretty fun. I enjoy that aspect of the job.
Good, yeah. I've always wondered this, right? Because at one point I wanted to do ATC, and then I realized how hard it was to get in, and then I became a cop. So it is what it is. What it is. Do you guys ever feel like friction between pilots at ATC? Kind of like the nerds versus the jocks, or, like for me in the law enforcement world, it was the street cops versus the dispatchers, right? Like the dispatchers are kind of the unsung heroes. They keep everything, that basically control the chaos so the cop can just go do the job and come back safe, right? Is there that same kind of mentality for you guys? Like you're the unsung heroes, you're the guys that have to keep everything safe, but nobody really knows who you are.
I think a lot of controllers like that aspect of the job too. They like almost the anonymity of it. I would also say that, yeah, I think there's some friction between pilots and controllers in that regard, which is part of the reason why I do this stuff, right? Because air traffic control knows their rules and knows their airspace the best. That we train on that. We know every little nook and cranny of our airspace. A pilot has to know everything about their route of flight, everything about their airplane. Those two thought processes don't really intersect until that pilot is flying through that airspace. The pilot doesn't know the airspace, unless they are a nerd and watch my videos. But they know what they need to do in order to get their plane safely from point A to point B, and we know what we need to do in order to get their airplane safely from point A to point B. That's the goal. But we both do separate things in order to achieve that goal. And that can create friction if your idea of how to achieve the goal and our idea of how to achieve the goal don't match. And unfortunately, all we can do is talk, right? You're the one flying the airplane. So how can I get you to do what I want you to do in order to achieve the goal? And there's different methods of doing that. And there's, the mean controller, and there's the happy controller, and there's the, do it now, or I'm going to turn you in controller, or there's the whatever. And I think that creates some bad taste in pilots' mouths because, they're the ones flying the airplane, and they're the ones that have ultimate say on what they're going to do. And so how do you convince a pilot to do what you want them to do? Well, I've found that if you explain why you're doing something, they're more likely to do it because they understand now. And there's no longer this mystery, and there's no longer this, oh, they're just turning me because they hate me. I don't hate you. No. I'm turning you because you're 20 in line, and they just slapped 20 miles in trail going to DFW. So everybody's getting a turn. It's not just you. But it feels like that they're the only plane in the sky because they're the ones flying the airplane. Whenever we see the big overview of like, okay, I need to get 20 in trail for you because in 5 sectors, there needs to be a gap for you. Because if there's not, then they're going to have to turn you over there. So you're going to get turned either way. Maybe multiple times, just because that's how it works. But it's nothing personal. It's just the job. And we know how to do it. And you know how to do your job. But us explaining why we have to do it, I think is helpful for pilots understanding it if we have time to explain it, right? And that's part of the problem too. Like today, I don't have time to explain why we're doing this. We just have to do it, And hopefully pilots are watching my videos, and there's been quite a few people who, whenever they're flying through, I'm like, hey, is this PropHatCat? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. They now have a better understanding of how the operation works so that they get, they understand the service better. And they understand that they are still getting a service, even if we're not talking to them, or even if they're a little bit short, or even if we're, we just say something here. They're like, oh, I understand that now because of X, Y, and Z. We're flow to Dallas, or, there's weather. Okay, this is why this is happening, right? Which then stops that friction from happening and puts everybody on the same team. Because ultimately, we're all on the same team. I want you to get to your place safe. You want to get to your place safe, obviously. And so having friction doesn't help anybody. And having that animosity doesn't help anybody. It just adds another hole of Swiss cheese, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that's kind of why I am doing this. That's my big why of why I'm doing this, because if I can just help one pilot understand why the process is working the way it is, then that's one less pilot that will feel resentment or feel animosity or feel, I don't like air traffic control, or air traffic control hates me, or blah, 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 right? And then that makes the NAS safer, at least for that one pilot, and then you just keep moving on. And hopefully, as more pilots learn and more pilots grow, and they're like, oh, wow, I'm a part of this bigger system, as opposed to just me flying from Fort Lauderdale to Miami, or Fort Lauderdale to LA or whatever.
That's cool, yeah. So one thing I really like about your channel, seems like a lot of ATC and pilot speak that's on the internet is negative, or they're fighting, because that gets views, right? It does. Everybody knows it. Everybody likes drama. Yeah. That's why MTV is MTV, right? Drama sells. But your channel is really refreshing because it's not negative about pilots. It's not negative about ATC. It's more like educational on, like you said, this is why we do this. This is what we expect. And if you have an issue, then call us, talk to us, whatever. So I appreciate that. And I've actually learned a lot just watching a few videos here. Like, 2 days ago, I watched a couple videos that were really good educational videos. And those both spun from a comment that you were answering. So that was really cool. Do you ever have a pilot call in after they land or whatever and be like, hey, why did you do XYZ?
Yeah. And then that spurs a lot of the content stuff that I make. Or are you saying like they land and then they call like the facility and they'll be like, hey, what happened here? Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah. It happens every now and then. Primarily at like your smaller like Tracons or towers, or where they kind of have a better working relationship with that facility because they fly into it or out of it a lot. Like, hey, today we climbed out to 5,000, but normally we only get 4,000. Why was that? Why did that happen? Oh, well, there's a new shelf, or, there's a TFR or something that happened over here. Oh, okay, cool. And then that's basically it. You can always call a facility. Now, if there's somebody available to sit down and talk to you, that's another thing. Like on a weekend, it may be difficult. During the day, on a weekday, whenever like the admin staff is there, maybe they'll be able to assist you a little bit better. But yeah, there's people at those facilities, unless they close 24/7. And so it's beneficial. It's available for that. Now, if you do call, be like, hey, I was flying on this frequency at this time, and this controller said this. Okay, well, then they can pull the tapes and be like, okay, well, this is what they meant. This is what was going on behind the scenes. And they can kind of explain to you what's going on during that as well. That's more for like if something happens. But you can even do it if nothing happens. If you just want to understand why you're getting this type of service, just call and see what's going on,
Cool. You mentioned earlier as well that you guys at ATC in whatever sector that you're in used to do a thing where you would ride along with the airlines, do a jump seat and kind of see what they do. Does that flow the opposite way too? Is there an avenue for pilots to sit in with air traffic control and just watch what happens?
Yeah, every facility should be able to give you a tour. It just depends on when they have staffing for that. If for us, it's Monday through Friday from like 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., which is silly, but that's what the bigwigs want. It's like, okay, well, if you want a tour, that's whenever you have to come in. And in order to schedule one of those, you can either reach out to a controller if you know a controller, or if you have like the flight data number, then you can call, like for a bigger TRACON, call the flight data number, have them transfer you to the supervisor or the operations manager on watch, and they can get your information that way. If you fly out of a tower, maybe your CFI knows, or somebody knows somebody in the tower, or you go to the FBO. The FBO will have the tower phone number as well if you don't already have it. And you can schedule a tour like that. Towers will probably be a little bit easier to visit kind of quickly. TRACON centers, maybe a little bit more notice, a week or two, at least 4 or 5 days if you can manage it. That's if you're a U.S. citizen. If you're international, it's like 30 days because they have to like do a whole like background check and stuff to make sure that you're not a wild person or something like that.
Right, but it is government still, so I understand that, yeah. So that's really cool. What would you say is your favorite part about air traffic control?
Favorite part about air traffic control? Just like sitting behind a radar scope and talking to an airplane and then having kind of like, I don't want to say like an out-of-body experience, but like this like epiphany, or this like almost like a movie. We've all seen those movies where there's like a car driving down a road. It's like the end of the movie. And then it's like the camera pan back of the car driving down the road. And it's like, wow, music's playing, sunset, blah, blah. That's kind of how it feels, because I've wanted to be a controller for so long on certain days. I'm like, oh, wow, this is just kind of surreal that I'm here. I'm at this moment because the training is so difficult. And there's so many things that had to go right in order for me to get to this point. And then I'm finally at this point, and I'm working by myself. I'm done training. I'm certified professional controller. And you kind of get like this moment of like, wow, this is really cool. If I want to turn this airplane, I can just turn him, like, and then they have to do it because the regulations say that they have to do it unless they can't. Like, that's crazy. I think that's one of the coolest parts. Also, I think you're in a room full of pilots. How do you know that they're pilots? They'll tell you, right? So people are like, oh, so what do you do? And like, oh, I'm an air traffic controller. And inevitably the first thing that they do is like, oh, the guy with the wands? Like, no. Okay. So that keeps you humble, right? You have this like, oh, you work so hard to get to this point, and then nobody really knows what you do anyway, which is kind of like the unsung hero kind of thing that we talked about earlier. But also not taking anything home with you, like I think that cannot be understated enough. Not taking anything home with you. Mandatory retirement at 56, which is not old. You can have a whole nother career after you're done doing air traffic. And, the people that you work with are for the most part pretty cool and pretty neat. And they've all been through this experience with you, right? I don't want to say it's a shared trauma, but it's definitely a bonding experience, right? Yes. And so, and you're working with them for the next 20, 25 years. So you might as well get along with them, or at least get used to them, right? So that's another benefit, because there's a wide variety of people who work at an air traffic control facility, but whenever they're controlling traffic, they're all the same personality, which is pretty cool, in my opinion.
Funny you brought that up. You have to get along with the people that you work with. Yeah. Because one of the last videos I watched yesterday was a comment that said, I heard somebody laughing in the background. Are they laughing at me? Whatever. Which I have thought that in my training days. So back in 2010-ish, whenever I was flying into downtown Kansas City, you go from center to approach to tower. I don't remember what happened, but whatever I said, my instructor laughed at me, and I'm like, I bet the dude on the other end's laughing at me too. You know what I mean? So yeah. Whenever you guys hear something funny, how hard is it not to laugh when you're keyed up? Does that ever happen?
No, it never happens. We're all very serious. We're all very serious on our end. There's no fun involved. No laughing at all. Yeah, and And like you said, most of the time, it's the people sitting next to you who, because we just talk to planes all day, and then we just talk to each other all day, and that's like all we do, right? We control airplanes by talking to them, and we when we're not talking to you, we're probably talking to somebody next to us, or talking to the supervisor or whatever. So there's inevitably going to be moments of hilarity ensuing, which sometimes crosses over the frequency, maybe. And you just kind of go with it. Most of the time, it's not about the pilot. Sometimes it is. Just depends on what they say. A corporate jet wanting flight level 420, kind of funny. It's like, we can't assign that to you. It's not a real altitude we can assign. I can give you a block. It's like the corporate bros, like, hey, November 123 requesting flight level 420. Like, oh, super cool. Unable? Like, I can give you 41 to 43. Okay, I will do that. Okay, cool. A big thing with air traffic control is we have really good short-term memory. We real-time, like, working knowledge of what's going on in the scope and what's going on in the room, right? We're very aware of what's going on. So somebody says something funny. Okay, cool. That's really funny. We're laughing. Blah, 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 blah. Whenever I unplug, I'm not going to remember what that was because that was not important to the operation. So it's dumped out of my memory, And unless somebody says something else, that's dumped out of my memory. It's kind of sad because I want to remember it, but also like that's just keeping a thing in my memory that I don't need, right? I don't know if you listen to Opposing Bases, but they talk about penguins on an iceberg, like the items to know, and you got to pick your penguins to stay on an iceberg. The funny things are funny, and then they're gone, and it was a moment that lasted, but it just fizzles away into the obscurity of a penguin floating off into the sunset,
That's fair. Yeah, that's good. Good to know, too, because now I won't feel so bad if I say something stupid.
Yeah. So if a pilot's like, oh, they were laughing at me, and you're going to be thinking about that all night, we've already moved on to 20,000 other things, right? Don't feel like we're going to remember that, Although I will say, you request, hey, Center, number 123 request flight level 360, and I say I have your request, and then I just never give it to you, and ship you off to the next controller. I'll go home and it'll be like, oh, I forgot to give that guy 36. Oh, well, moving on, right. Just like circles back. Like, dang it.
And that happens. That's okay. Let's get into a little bit about the training, right? There are a lot of rules for becoming an air traffic controller, right? You have to be under a certain age. Like you said, you have to retire at 56. You have to be able to speak fluent English, right? Which is all of aviation in general, but definitely have to be able to speak fluent English. If somebody that you're talking to wants to get into air traffic control, what are the main things they need to focus on right now?
The biggest hurdle, I think, in becoming a controller is the application process, because there's kind of four ways to become a controller. I guess simplest way, more of the off the street way of becoming a controller, requires there to be an air traffic controller hiring bid. And the FAA puts out like one or two of those a year. So it's not like just a continuously hiring open bid. It's maybe one time in May, maybe one time in October, and that's it. And, they'll get 40, 50, 60,000 applicants each bid. And then from those applicants, they'll get, 30,000 to maybe take the aptitude test. And then of that, they'll get maybe 8,000 or 6,000 people to actually go to academy. And of that, maybe you'll get, I'm just making up these numbers. It could be less. I'm sure it's less. But you'll get, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 trainees that graduate academy. Then they go to their facility. And, depending on the facility, New York's washout rate, I think, is 56%. Oh, wow. So every other person that goes there is going to wash out. So you have 40 people go there, 20 people are not going to make it through the process.
That's wild.
Which, even to get there, you've already had to go through so many different weed out processes, right? And it's designed that way for a reason, right? This is an important job, and you want people who are able to do the job doing the job, right? So that's the off-the-street bid. If you're previous military, if you're a military controller, and you have 52 weeks of controlling airplanes, you can do what's called a direct hire bid. Now, that one is continuous, I'm pretty sure, where you have 52 weeks, you're coming up to your retirement date from the military or whatever. And if you have 52 weeks of control experience, you can just apply to this previous experience bid. Normally it's for tower and TRACON controllers because the military doesn't really do center stuff. And you're basically direct hired to a facility and you train at that facility. So you don't have to go to Oklahoma City. We talked about that earlier. So off the street people have to go to Oklahoma City. Normal CTI people have to go to Oklahoma City. Military people direct hire to a facility. The third way, you go to a college, kind of. It's like a 2-year program. I know one of them is called Advanced ATC, and you basically get your control tower operator certificate, your CTO, through this program. And then that also allows you to work at their contract towers, which are not federal towers, they're contract towers, get your 52 weeks. And again, once you do that, you can apply direct hire to the FAA to a tower and become a FAA controller that way. The fourth way is relatively new. It's called an enhanced CTI. So the CTI program I went to is just normal CTI, which is basically teaches you academy basics. So to give you the overview, at the academy, you have a month of academy basics, and then depending on if you're going the tower track or the en route track, tower track is 2 months, en route track is 3 months. So total, it would be 4 months or 3 months, depending, right? The plan was with the CTI program, you do CTI at a college, and you do basics basically at that college. So whenever you go to academy, you don't have to do basics there. You just go straight into an academy class. It's supposed to get you out of Oklahoma faster and get you to a facility faster. That was that plan. In like 2016, they kind of changed how they hire people. So they no longer gave like priority to CTI graduates. They just lumped you together with off the street people. Okay, whatever. And you weren't able to like skip basics if you wanted to. Anyway, with the enhanced CTI program, ECTI, ooh, fancy. It's an agreement between colleges that have more advanced simulation stuff. So tower simulators, TRACON simulators. I think there's an ERAM simulator as well at some colleges. UND or Embry-Riddle, I think, have the ERAM stuff. I could be wrong. And basically, you go to this college. I think it's a 2-year program, and could be 4-year. Probably 2. And you basically do the academy stuff at that college. Then once you graduate, you're evaluated by FAA evaluators at your college. And if you pass, you still have to do all the pre-employment stuff. But if you pass, you are direct hired to a federal facility, and you don't have to go to Oklahoma. So It's supposed to free up space in Oklahoma for more off-the-street people so that you're basically, I don't want to say you're guaranteed a job, but if you do everything and you pass, you basically have a job. Whereas in Oklahoma, you really don't know until you're done, And Oklahoma, again, 3-month program or 4-month program, whereas your college is a 2-year program. So you're having more time to understand the material than somebody at Oklahoma. But again, you're also doing other college stuff. But it's not as drinking from the fire hose, which I think will be beneficial in the long run because you're actually going to be able to digest this stuff more. I guess you're going to become more aware of the stuff easier or whatever. I don't know. Depends on how you study too, right? That's, I guess, the fourth way to become a controller is the ECTI program. It's relatively new. I think they have like 20 or 30 colleges, and it's primarily just tower or TRACON track. I think only 2 have this center. I could be wrong about that, though. Don't quote me on that. And then all that to say, I've heard through the grapevine, again, don't quote me, that the FAA is going to be having an off-the-street hiring bid in July during Oshkosh. And they're going to be having like a hiring booth, something or other there. I don't know where I heard that. I just heard it somewhere, and I'm like, oh, I'm hopeful that hopefully we'll have a hiring bid this year. We were supposed to have one last November, I think, or December. But then the government shutdown happened. They pushed it back to January. Another government shutdown happened. And like, okay, well, they've just kind of been postponing that hiring bid. So it's if they follow precedent, there will be one this year. I think it'll be during Oshkosh because
that'd be cool.
That's kind of a cool thing. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. What are like the minimum requirements to be air traffic control?
You have to be older than 18. You have to have a year of work experience or a year of college or a combination of the both. you have to read, write, and understand English, pass a security clearance, pass a background check, be younger than 31. Yeah, 31 because retirement at 56, and they want 25 years out of you for a pension. And so that's the 25-year thing. And then everyone's like, why do they have an age thing? That's age discrimination. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But that's with the pension thing. And that's one of the main benefits of the job, retirement at 56. So, I don't know. It sucks, but also, womp womp, you know.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is, you know. It'll take an act of Congress to change that, literally.
So do you go through a medical before you get into
Yeah. So it's equivalent to an FAA pilot class 2 medical. So it's an air traffic medical, and it's basically a class 2, but they classify it differently because air traffic, I guess.
Does that medical expire? Did you have to like continue to do medicals? Or?
Yeah. So under 40 years of age, you have to do a medical every 2 years. Over 40, it's every year. And over 40, I think you have to get an EKG every 2 years. I could be wrong. I don't know about that. But I do know you have to get an EKG once you get a little bit older. And they schedule it and they pay for it, and they're like, hey, you have your medical today. Okay, well, glad I didn't drink that Monster. Otherwise, my heart's going to be like boom, 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 you know. But normally it's in your birth month, so you just kind of have to keep an eye out there. But yeah, it's you know, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do, but also there's not a lot of stuff. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. It's apply, and then you wait 6 months, and then your HR rep's like, you have 36 hours to reply to this email with your X, Y, and Z. Okay, here you go. Bloop, bloop, bloop. They're like, okay, 8 months later. All right, you have to schedule your ATSA immediately. Like, oh my God. Although I think you can schedule the ATSA now after you apply. That's one of the big changes that they made, which I think the application process is a little bit easier to get people to apply. And then they just figure out the processing after, which is more beneficial than I think they had like people do it by hand. And now I think they've got it computerized, which
it's nice. Yeah.
Is nice.
Yeah. So was there any time that you hit a hurdle during your training that like you didn't know if you were going to make it?
This is going to make me sound like I was God's gift to air traffic control. I don't know. After today, I highly doubt it. You know, the VATSIM stuff really helped. And I could see myself as a controller. And I think that's half the battle. It's just a big mental game. The training process is such a strenuous process. It's such a mind game that you have to work through because this job is so... It takes a lot. It takes a lot from you. It takes a lot of your attention. It takes a lot of your stuff. Every single thing that you do and say is critiqued by your instructor who's plugged in behind you, by your supervisor. And everything that you do is wrong because it's never the right way to do it. And you just kind of have to keep working with that. I'm very much a person who likes positive, like, training affirmations, you know? There's very little of that in this. I'm like, why'd you do that? I don't know. Well, don't do it that way. Okay. And so I think that was the biggest hurdle is you get in your own head, I think, with a lot of this stuff. And, you know, just like anything, you have up, 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 and then you kind of plateau, and then you up, 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 and you plateau. They like saying every day is a training day in the FAA because it is. You know, you're always learning something. You're learning something new every day. If you plateau, you're not learning anything. And this job requires constant learning because rules change, regulations change, aircrafts change. You know, back whenever our most senior controller was hired in 1992, RVSM Airspace didn't exist back then, you know? And everybody's flying in 717s or 727s. The 737-400 or 600 was out, you know? Like, the types of airplanes change so much, and that affects how you do the job. And so being able to adapt to those changes and to those challenges is hard for some people. And it was hard for me. You know, we have a new thing called CPDLC, which is Controller Pilot Data Link Connection. I have a lot of videos about that. But that's a pretty big learning curve for some of the more experienced controllers because now there's new data block stuff and there's new stuff on the flight strips, and you kind of have to remember how to do like normal control, but then you have these other tools that you can use. Okay, how can I augment what I'm doing now with the new stuff if I want to do that, And so in training, there's just so much to know, and there's so much to learn that it's very, very easy to get overwhelmed if you just start thinking about it. With a lot of my videos, I'll be like, okay, I want to talk about why does air traffic control say short stay with me? It's a question. That's a simple question. But then whenever you sit back and you're like, why do we say short stay with me? Well, it's because you were flashed through a sector. Okay, what does flash through mean? Okay, well, a flash through is controller A hands off the radar target to controller B. Then controller B hands off the radar target to controller C. Controller C takes the radar target. And then controller A transfers radio communications to controller C. That's a flash through. Okay, what is a handoff? Because they're handing off. So you just start working backwards for these concepts that are easy to see and easy to do once you've done 8 million of them. But when you're trying to learn it, it's a foreign language. It's learning a whole new way to think. And that's one of the hardest parts, I think, for a lot of people. And then, me being dumb, I try and explain that kind of stuff in 3 minutes or less, because that's what Instagram requires for their reel length. And that's why you sometimes get part 1 and part 2, because I hate doing the parts, but I just can't fit everything in part 1 because it's just too much. There's just too much.
That's a challenge, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So another thing that I think is really cool that I didn't know before I watched one of your videos, the way that you know how to say things. So like if it's United Airlines and they have a UAL, right? So they have their identifiers, and then you guys just know that's what it is. And it could be because you've worked a bunch of them, but there's also like a list with this is what this means and this is how you say it. I had no idea that existed. That was really cool. Little things like that you teach us is just, I don't know, it's really awesome. So it might not mean something to you, but it does to us.
Yeah. So
we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And we get, before we can control a position, we have to do our pre-duty weather items and pre-duty briefings. And we'll get notifications that are like, hey, Iconic or VistaJet just changed their call sign to Iconic. Okay, and then we go and we see the VJA and we're like, okay, VistaJet, Iconic, 1, 2, 3, climb and maintain, blah, blah, blah. And then, like you said, we have the ERIDS, that information display system next to us, where it's a big iPad. We can type in whatever call sign it is. So what I really like pilots doing is if you have a funky call sign like that and you don't have anything else in your remarks that you want to put in there, put call sign equals SkyCube or call sign equals Clearwing or whatever. Like if you have a weird one, that's so nice because yes, we can pull up the ERIDS, but also we're looking at those remarks, or we should be looking at the remarks. And so if you say it, or if you put it in there and oh, cool, now I don't have to look it up. And it's just one less thing that we have to do. And that ingratiates us to you because you did a little bit of work to help us not have to do a little bit of work. So that's little
good to know, yeah.
Little secret, how to make your air traffic controllers slightly like you better,
That's good, yeah.
Put your call sign in the remarks.
Another thing that I thought was interesting. So if we use phonetics, and you said it kind of resets your OODA loop in a way. I know that you say phonetics nonstop, right? That's a thing in aviation. Why do you think it is that whenever a pilot says phonetics to you, you're like, oh, hang on.
Well, we're just not used to listening to them. We're the ones that normally give it to the pilot. And so whenever a pilot requests something and they just start rattling it off, especially if we're not ready, our brains kind of have to click to be like, okay, hold on. W's whiskey, Papa's P, Oscar's O. Just because it's not one of those things that we practice every day, because it's a pretty rare occurrence, actually, whenever a pilot's requesting fixes from us using phonetics. I will say today, separate sector, not the crazy one, but there was a Delta. There was an airplane that flies out of Atlanta a lot that had a route, got a new traffic management route, plugged it in, couldn't do that route. The controller, okay, so this is a thing, right? Going back to our flash through procedure, I need to give you the context of the situation. So
Okay.
in ERAM, which is the En route automation modernization computer system, the radar system that we use, we can pull up a flight plan. Bloop, there it is. Shows me all the fixes, shows me all the airways. I can shortcut you on that. It's basically, we're glorified data entry clerks. Everything that we tell a pilot, we have to put into the computer system. And this is that. So we have a flight plan window, has all that stuff. There's like drop downs at the bottom of that window that have like pre-filled in routes that airplanes normally fly that are adapted for our sector, for our specialty. And so traffic management can also send down a traffic management route, and it replaces your route in blue. And then we have to issue it. Once we issue it, it replaces it into like the normal black and white. So that's how we know if you have a T route. If you clear somebody to a fix, and then they're like, actually, we don't want that, there's a button that says previous route. You can click previous route, and then it puts their route back to how it was before you cleared them to that fix. If you make 2 amendments, you can no longer previous route the first amendment. So if you're flying like Houston, Lake Charles, LSU, Shire, going to Atlanta, if I gave you Houston, LSU, and then you make the turn, and then I'm like, actually, I want to give you Shire, so Houston to Shire, shortcut. But then you're like, actually, we just want to go back onto our original route. If I clicked previous route, it would only make you go present position to LSU. It wouldn't put you back over Lake Charles, right? So if you make 2 amendments, it deletes any previous routing. So this is important because this Delta got this T route. The sector next to us gave them the T route, and then they turned and they're flying and they're like doing their fuel calculations. Actually, this isn't going to work for us. We need to go back to our previous route. They're telling us this now. They've been handed off to us. We're talking to them. The previous controller had shortcut them twice from their original filed route. So we don't have that route anymore. So, and this is a completely different route than the one that they had filed. And so now it's, okay, what was your route? Because we don't have it. You have it written down, hopefully, or on your release or whatever. Now we have to type it back into the computer system because we're the ones that deleted it from the computer system. So it's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
This would be a good video topic. I'm just thinking because that's a. Why does air traffic control say what was your route? Well, this is why.
That would be a great video. Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm on what's called a D side. I'm like helping the radar controller. I'm like an assistant. And we're asking this Delta, hey, can we get this routing for you? And it's a long routing. It's a weather avoidance route that they had filed on the ground. And they're like, yeah, stand by. So I get like a pen and paper because like there's airways on it and there's different syntax stuff that we have to type in order to get it back into the computer. So I'm just going to write it down. Makes it easy. And I'm like expecting the pilot to say, we're direct Lima Alpha Uniform Romeo Lima, direct Bravo Oscar Golf Golf Yankee. Like, okay, I'm preparing my ears to listen for phonetics. But then he just starts saying, Delta, we're going direct Palacios, direct Hoffman, direct Laughlin, direct Marfa, direct El Paso, direct, and I'm like, oh, hold on, you're saying the words. Hold on, type, right. And Palacios is a VOR and Laughlin is a VOR, and there's like all this stuff. And it's like I was not prepared for like normal words. I was prepared for phraseology or phonetics. Anyway, luckily those waypoints were relatively easy to type in, like Papa Sierra X-ray Delta Lima Foxtrot, and then that tied back into one of those drop-down routes that we had on the actual computer system. We were able to get it all back in, but that was not on my bingo card of things that I thought I would have to do today, because that was quite a lot of stuff. Like a little notepad with all the... Anyway, that was a really long explanation for that question.
That's okay. That's all right, man. I appreciate you coming on. Everybody follow PropHatCat on TikTok and Instagram. I've learned a lot of stuff from him. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot of stuff from him. I always ask the same question every time at the end of this. However, I'm going to change it a little bit for you, because we've already established that you didn't go through and learn how to fly. And so far, everybody I've talked to, whether they were maintenance or FAA or pilots, whatever, they've all been at least private pilots. So normally I say, if you could have any aircraft for personal use, what would it be and why, right? But for you, I'm going to say, if you could work any air traffic control position, what would it be and why? So like any tower, any approach, any en route facility, any of the facilities that you could possibly pick, where would it be and why?
I think this is going to be a really simple question, or really simple answer, because I'm at a really good facility and I'm at a really good area, and it's really hard to think of anywhere else that would be better. I love where I work. I love the people that I work with. I love the airspace that I work. I love all of the stuff about it. Yeah, it can be annoying sometimes, but that's just the nature of the beast. I think if I really, really, really had to pick, though, you said you can't work where you're working at now.
No, you can work there, but okay. To make it funner, where else would you work?
I really got into air traffic, with the CTI program, and you don't want to work in a tower. Like, people think, oh, the tower, that's the thing. You look at the airplanes taking off and landing. So I think, being a Texas guy, I think DFW Tower, Houston Tower, or Bush Tower would be pretty cool. Bush Tower would be nice because I wouldn't have to move. It's just like right up the road from where the center is. So that'd be pretty nice. But yeah, probably Bush Tower if I had to pick.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I would think that would be awesome as well. I don't know what the workload is for the tower guys versus the en route guys.
Well, they got it easy. Man, compared to us.
That'll get some comments.
Yeah. They hate us because they ain't us, like.
Oh, that's good stuff. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing with us your story, how you got into aviation, and all the joys and some of the not so joyous times, but I appreciate it all the same. Follow PropHatCat. He's got some good stuff. He's going to continue putting out good stuff. And if nothing else, especially if you're a commercial pilot flying through the Houston area, watch PropHatCat, because then you'll learn what he wants. Any
Awesome.
last words?
Nope, just thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, sir. And as always, folks, remember that success starts with a positive attitude. Thanks for watching another episode of the MoAir Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to follow PropHatCat. If you want to share your story on the MoAir Podcast, send me an email at moairsales@gmail.com.